Well, first of all, it's so excited to meet you. Thank you so much for taking some time. It's morning for you, right? You're about an hour behind me.
I think so. Yeah. I don't. Where are you located,
I'm
Jacqueline?
in Greenville, South Carolina.
Okay. So yeah, you're about an hour. Yeah, you're an hour ahead of me. So
Okay.
I'm in Minnesota, so not too far.
Yeah, like what, 20-hour drive or so?
I have no idea.
Not too far.
The only time I've gone to the East Coast has been flying. So
Yeah, I moved here about a year and a half ago from Boston. So it's funny. It's about an hour and a half home for me from New Jersey, which is where my family lives, and then a 13-hour drive, which I will not ever really make. So
very cool. Well, thank you for just inviting me onto your podcast. I've spent some time listening to other guests that you've had, and I enjoy the content that you've been putting out. I think it's valuable and fascinating, interesting to hear other professionals talk about, how to just improve people's lives and what the research says and all that sort of stuff.
thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And certainly you've done some incredible work. I first heard about you from Chris Wark. I listened to his podcast. I've been a longtime follower and fan of his work. I had him on the show not too long ago, but heard your interview with him and realized, I don't have much content on eye health, and I'm a big fan. I love your Instagram. I love all of the video content you create. So super
Thank you.
excited to have you on and chat with you today again on a topic that I don't really cover.
Yeah. It's sadly eye care is something that most people don't think about until there's a problem and it's too late to do anything about it.
I hear you. Well, I am 28 years old and I'm starting to realize that digital eye strain is a very real
Mm.
condition, right? So I'd love to speak with you on that topic. But
Yeah.
just to start, so you have a very interesting background. I'd love for you to share with listeners how your approach to eye care differs from the more conventional standard approach.
Hmm. So, I think a lot of doctors share a similar approach that I have. I think just historically, we're very much trained in the traditional kind of Western philosophy of medicine. That it's very, there's a disease and we treat the disease. That surgery is it's easy to jump to surgery to correct something rather than finding either a kind of functional version to reduce symptoms to get things better. And so I think myself I was trained with my residency and everything to follow the evidence, the guidelines, and we do still reach for a lot of medications when appropriate, when necessary, but I try to really encourage my patients and try to spend time talking with them about how the rest of the body is definitely connected to the eyes, and their lifestyle will affect their eyes, and what they do today can hopefully prevent diseases and complications down the road, starting even at young age of being children. So it's an important topic, and I think I like to think, just like you and all of your guests, that the world is sort of turning a little bit away from just like this very cookie cutter, emergency medicine approach. That well, if you break your leg, this is how you treat it. Well, it's like no, we have a lot more of these chronic diseases, these things that are in our lifestyle that we can start to fine tune and optimize, and it ends up having this repercussion effect that can echo your lifetime. So I like to think that.
I love that. No, I couldn't agree more. Well, within that umbrella of things that you recommend to patients, I'd love to start with nutrition. So,
Hmm.
you have a very interesting, I guess, approach. I've heard you advocate for a plant based diet when it comes to eye health. I'm super interested, again, just from a nutritional standpoint. What are some of the best foods for eye health? And do you have a general dietary approach that you advocate for?
So first, I guess I'll take the second part first. I'll do it backwards. I generally still, the evidence largely agrees that a Mediterranean diet is by far the best for the eyes. With, I think, I hyper focus on the fruits and vegetable component. That and I should say whole foods is number one,
Mm-hmm.
because so many, and I think almost everybody who talks about nutrition or studies it finds that least common denominator. Most of us, especially in Western civilizations here in the U.S., we're eating so much processed food, and that isn't necessarily equaling great health outcomes. The component of eating more fruits and veggies, good for the eyes. That has been well studied and well known. The retina in the back of the eye, these are your photoreceptors, all the cells that send the signals to the back of your brain to help you see. This is the most highly metabolic tissue in your body.
Interesting.
It's constantly being bombarded by light energy. From the moment you open your eyes in the morning, it's constantly receiving this light energy. It's going through oxidative stress and inflammation and has to constantly fight that to keep itself healthy. And so to do that, you need a lot of antioxidants, and you get most of those from fruits and veggies. The most important, everybody thinks, oh, what's the best food for the eyes? And you'd probably say, what would you say, Jacqueline? Carrots,
right?
There you go.
But it's actually not.
It's actually not. I think carrots do have an important role and are healthy for the eyes. For people listening in who haven't heard the story, the reason everybody thinks that myth about carrots came from World War II. Great Britain at that time had invented a new type of radar that would help them detect German warplanes at nighttime. But they didn't want the Germans to know that they had this technology, and so they started a propaganda of basically kind of reverse propaganda, like, hey, let's put out these posters getting people to eat more veggies because it's better for the economy at that time during wartime, but then also to kind of confuse the Germans and not let them know that they have this new technology, that their scouts had supervision because they eat their carrots.
That is so interesting. I never knew that.
Yeah, it is really it's fascinating to look into that and see the different propaganda posters that they made. But carrots have beta carotene, which your body can convert to vitamin A, which is an important essential nutrient for eyesight. However, most people are not deficient in vitamin A by far, unless they're malnourished. And the few people out there who have maybe a disease that prevents them from absorbing or holding vitamin A appropriately. But carrots do still have antioxidants, which are still very healthy for the eyes and the body. But by far, right now, still green leafy vegetables are basically the best thing. And the darker the green, usually the better. So kale, spinach, arugula, anything that's bitter with the dirt taste.
I love that.
The reasons why that is. And so I like to emphasize that to my patients, that it's don't just do what I say. I want you to understand why, because if you understand why it's healthy, you're more motivated to go ahead with it. In green leafy vegetables, there's something called lutein and zeaxanthin. And have you ever heard of those, Jacqueline?
I have. So
at least you have, but I'd say 9 out of 10 patients that I ever see have no idea. They've never heard of those two things.
Not surprised.
And if it was vitamin L and vitamin Z or something like that, maybe people would have heard about it. For again, listeners who've never heard of these are called carotenoid pigments. And over 600 different carotenoid pigments exist in nature, and only these two pigments go to the eye, and specifically the eye and the brain. They're stored in fat cells, but they primarily get shunted to the eye, and over 1,000 times more concentrated in the eye than anywhere else. Yeah. So they have 3 functions inside the eye. So there's lutein and zeaxanthin that you get from food, and then your body will take lutein in the eye and convert it to another carotenoid called mesozeaxanthin.
That one I've not heard of.
Yeah, and some supplements have mesozeaxanthin in them, but it's not naturally found in nature, so it's synthetically made. But these 3 work by, one, they filter out high energy light. So of all the light that can enter the eye and hit the retina, this yellow pigment absorbs that harsh, high energy blue light that you hear so much about. And so it shields that and protects the delicate retina. But then it has 2 other effects. It reduces oxidative stress, which again, the retina is constantly under fighting for. And then it has an anti-inflammatory component to it as well. So it helps protect the retinal structures. And this is why it's one of the key ingredients for all eye or retinal vitamins that are either available over the market, people can purchase, or that doctors will prescribe for certain retinal health conditions like macular degeneration, for example. So that's huge, and that's found in green leafy vegetables. You can get lutein and zeaxanthin in some red peppers. You can find it in avocado, pistachios, and in egg yolk. They actually supplement lutein in chicken feed to help egg yolks look brighter, more yellow.
Wow, so interesting.
The other great reason why green leafy vegetables are healthy for the eyes has to do with nitric oxide. Um, if again, for listeners who haven't heard too much on nitric oxide, it comes from fruits and veggies and a lot of other foodstuffs, but when it comes from like green leafy vegetables, for example, it helps with the dilation of blood vessels. And the back of your eye is just a huge network of blood vessels, actually multiple layers of blood vessels. And that came very clear to me when I was in my residency. And I'm at the VA. I was at the VA Medical Center here in Minneapolis. And so many of my patients, they're all diabetic. They all have high blood pressure. They have cholesterol issues. They've had multiple strokes, erectile dysfunction. It just, the list goes on, and they're on 200 medications. And so I started recognizing the importance of systemic blood flow and arteries, your veins, and how they affect the eyeball. And so not only does nitric oxide help with these conditions, again, like diabetes, high blood pressure, and there's a lot of documented science on this, but it also helps with glaucoma, specifically an eye disease that can lead, it's a silent eye disease. A lot of people who go blind from glaucoma have no idea what's going on. But yeah, the ingestion of nitric oxide and the use of nitric oxide helps relax a certain fiber inside the eye called the trabecular meshwork. And it's basically the drainage canal for eye pressure. And so it helps with the fluid outflow of the eye and reducing eye pressure. And one of our medications now for glaucoma is basically a nitric oxide eye drop.
Wow, that's fascinating. I feel like the eye is like one of the most complex organs in the body, right? Like there's just, you're just going on. I'm like, this is just such a complex network. I can't even imagine how you studied all of this in school. But you know how they say the eyes are the window to the soul?
Mm-hmm.
Would you say that it's also accurate to say that the eyes are the window into someone's health?
Oh, absolutely. 100%. It is.
So with that, like, are there certain conditions that you can detect that someone may have just by an eye exam?
Yes, very much so. And thanks for asking this. So what's beautiful about the eye is that it's optically clear. So we can view just by looking into the eye, we can see your blood vessels in action. Like if you see your primary care provider and you're being assessed for diabetes, they can't just look at your arm through your skin and tell you're diabetic. They have to do blood tests first, right? We can look into your eye without drawing blood, without cutting you open, and we can see if somebody's starting to become diabetic. Wow. We can see effects of high blood pressure on the arteries and veins. I've caught patients with not only these diseases, but anemia. I've caught multiple sclerosis. I've caught many autoimmune conditions because of a lot of these autoimmune conditions. It's kind of fascinating, but a lot of autoimmune conditions somehow cause inflammation in the eye, even if it's on a different part of your body. Somehow it communicates to the eye, especially your gut. And they're now starting to understand a lot more of what they call the gut retinal or the gut eye axis.
Interesting.
And so, we catch a lot of different conditions in the eye. And I even had a patient not too long ago. He's actually he works for a major health insurance company, and he came in, even though he has no vision problems. And that's really a key thing I would love more people to understand, is that even though you feel you see fine, your vision's great, you maybe don't need glasses, but they never go in for an eye exam. There's a lot of people who do that. And this gentleman, he came in and he had no complaints. He told me, no, the reason I'm coming in, and I brought my son in too, is because I'm the one doing the research for this insurance company. I'm not going to say who it was, but he even said the data shows the eye exam is the least invasive and most affordable, medical evaluation that results in the most beneficial health outcomes for just screening for all these other diseases.
Wow.
And so I wish I could have recorded him on tape saying that, because I would have echoed it, 1,000 times over. But that's why a lot of health insurances now include some form of eye or vision care component.
Interesting. I feel convicted. The last time I went in for an eye doctor exam was probably 3 years ago, 3 years ago. So, would you recommend that everyone, despite age, go in for an annual eye exam?
I do, and it's reflected in some recent studies. They did a multidisciplinary look. The American Optometric Association basically spent money to hire a multidisciplinary approach to looking at, like, when should eye exams be done? Is it every year, every 2 years? And between all these different healthcare professionals looking at the data, the research, they all said yes, an annual eye exam is the recommended. What's recommended, even for people who don't have eyesight or vision problems.
Interesting. Okay, so I've always had 20/20 vision.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I'm also at a point in my life where I feel like I spend most of my time sadly on a screen, which I am trying to change. But certainly with that, despite my using my blue light glasses and
Mm.
whatnot, I still have noticed times where I will just be experiencing blurry vision and, of course, other symptoms of digital eye strain. So just for me, and I'm sure so many other listeners out there who are dealing with the same issue, how can we mitigate the effects of digital eye strain while also recognizing that many of us sadly do have to rely on screens for work?
Right. So digital eye strain is complex, or what previously was known as computer vision syndrome.
Hmm.
Uh, it's more complex than just blue light. In fact, a lot of research is still inconclusive about how much blue light really plays a role in digital eye strain and eye fatigue. But we know with the eye, when you are staring at a screen, first understand you're having to focus at something much closer than just looking in the distance. Like if you're driving, you're looking off into the infinity, as we say, past 20 feet. Uh, and so you have to engage an eye muscle inside of the eye called the ciliary body. This helps flex the lens inside of your eye to focus. But when you use that muscle to focus up close, it's neurologically tethered to the muscles on the outside of your eye, which have to turn your eyes inward toward your nose.
Wow.
On top of that, it's also tethered to the pupil muscles, the two muscles that control your pupils to make them smaller. So when you look up close at your phone, for example, your pupils even get tiny. And it's really hard to control them independently from each other. So when you're trying to focus on a computer screen for, let's say, 8 hours, at minimum, most people are on the computer for at least 8 hours a day. And then you go home and people are still on their phone. If they're,
Scrolling.
yeah, if you go on a break from work, you're doing what? You're still looking at your phone.
It's so sad.
It's tough, even for myself. So understand you have a lot of eye muscles that are trying to hold. It's not much weight, but it's holding a weight. I like to compare it to people going to the gym. You can pick up a 5-pound weight and probably lift that with your bicep 300 times. Oh, maybe not. I don't know. I've never done 300. I've never tried 5 pounds 300 times, but most people could probably pick up that 5 pounds, hold it halfway, and hold it there for a long time. But if you hold it there long enough, eventually the muscle gets tired.
Mhm.
And so that's what your eyes are battling. They're trying to hold one set of weight really close for a long set of time. And so it's important to take breaks. And, they have what's called the 20-20-20 rule. It's not super scientific. In fact, they did a scientific study trying to validate if there's any benefit to that, and they found it really doesn't. But it's still an important reminder to take more frequent breaks.
Mhm.
I encourage people to get outside more, just to get away from being indoors. So it's not just staring at a screen, but getting outdoors. And there's a lot of benefits to that for young children. For anybody that's college age or younger, definitely try to get 2 hours a day outside. That has to do with more nearsightedness or myopia development, which we can talk about if we have time. But um, the other kind of good tips I like to share for people when you're on a computer, realize your posture. If you're hunched forward, that's affecting your spine, it's affecting your shoulders, your neck. All of these sort of things can be influencing to your systemic health, your body health, your mood, your focus. Tilting your computer screen just enough where you don't want to be like looking down on your screen. You don't want to be looking up on your screen. You want to be basically looking straight ahead. And this is a challenge for people who, for a lot of people who are over the age of 40, their ability to focus up close becomes a challenge. And we call that presbyopia.
Mm.
And so they end up having to get glasses or some form of optical correction called either bifocals. No one likes the B word in eye care, or progressives. And those often have a magnification component at the bottom of the frame.
Yeah.
And so what they end up doing is they're sitting on the computer and they're tilting their head up and they're looking through the bottom portion of the glasses to see the computer. Well, that hurts the back of your neck. And it
Yep.
makes, and then they're trying to find the sweet spot for the magnification. So they're constantly moving and adjusting, and it's really frustrating. So
Yeah.
for people who are in that scenario, who do maybe need reading glasses or bifocals, I do often write a separate glasses prescription that we measure for the computer. Because then it's the whole frame of the lenses for the glasses. They have the whole lens to focus on that one spot of where their computer is, that one distance. They don't have to use their eye muscles as much. But so that's another thing for people to consider, is getting and going to an eye doctor and saying specifically, I spend this much time on a screen. I would love to be fitted for computer specific glasses and be tested for that.
Yeah.
And if you do go in for that, do yourself a favor. It helps me out. I'm always impressed when a patient does this. And it's usually engineers. I can't say it's always, but it's usually engineers, because they've already thought about it. But measure the distance from where you normally sit in front of the computer and measure that in centimeters from your eye to the computer screen. And using a tape measure just to have that general idea, because if you tell me that, then I know exactly how far to measure that in the clinic for like a pair of dedicated computer glasses.
Wow, that's so interesting. You're gonna laugh. I have my mom here with me. She's visiting for a few weeks, just spending some time.
Hey,
and
Mom.
currently she's reading right now, but she also has been struggling with her eyesight, and I'm always correcting her with her posture because she does exactly the same thing that you illustrated before. I'm like, Mom, posture. And she's like, oh, sorry. So yeah, I feel like, I mean, when we're more self-aware of things like that, it definitely can help improve over time. And also too, just curious, is it possible to actually improve our vision once it started to decline?
Well, the question is, I have to follow up with like how do you mean to improve your vision? Do you mean reverse your need for glasses? Do you mean
So
just
let's say first let's do two parts. Part one would be to prevent further decline. So let's say someone's already experienced a decline in their vision. We want to stop it from getting worse.
Right.
Outside of glasses, are there any things that we could implement?
So right now, what's a good rule of thumb again? So let's say myopia, nearsightedness, because a lot of people say my vision's getting bad, and then they go and see us, and then suddenly they're nearsighted. Again, there is a myopia epidemic that's been going on worldwide, especially in parts like in China. But certainly it's affecting the United States. About 25-30% of people are nearsighted, but it's increasing, and it's projected to about 50% of the world's population will be nearsighted by like 2050.
Wow, that's crazy. Is that just from the use of like computers and screens, or?
It's a complicated question. Right now, they know that more time indoors plays a significant factor in that. So, especially young children. This isn't like adults. This is happening in young children, how the eye elongates due to being indoors. Increased demand for near work, mainly through education, whether it be reading or computers. So the research shows it's not anything magical about the computer screen, at least not that we understand yet. But whether it be books, whether it be a computer, a tablet, it's just being indoors and being in front of something up close. The more time you spend doing that at a young age, the more likely they are to become myopic or nearsighted. And so they did find, at least in one study with college students, that students who spent at least 2 hours a day outside had a mitigating effect on their myopia advancement. So that's one of the reasons why a lot of doctors suggest for young kids spend at least 2 hours a day outside.
Wow.
But thankfully, we live in a world now where there's a lot of interesting research going on to prevent or reduce the advancement of myopia, whether it be specialized contact lenses, special glasses that are now being invented. There's atropine eye drops that can have an effect. And then, quite fascinating and more recent research is the use of red light therapy. And there's some research that shows that children being treated with red light therapy can have a slowing effect to the development of nearsightedness.
Interesting.
Still very early research, so I don't want people out there like shining red lights on their kids. We still have to understand more of, what wavelength, how long, if there's a rebound effect, if they stop. We're still investigating that, but it's fascinating.
I'm so glad you touched on that, because I did want to ask you that. I've read, again, I mean, you know more than I do on this, but a lot of conflicting research on the benefits of red light, specifically when you're looking directly at it, right? And some have said it's really beneficial for your eyes, while others have said it could potentially damage your vision.
Right.
And I know there's a handful of companies that, with their red light devices, they give you those glasses to wear where you literally just like blackout, can't see anything. But overall, what are your thoughts on that in terms of, just damaging versus the benefit?
So I love this whole red light research stuff. I have a CE lecture where I educate doctors on this to bring them up to speed, because it's something that I did not learn about when I was in school. This is such new information that we're kind of learning with the discovery of red light therapies. So when it comes to the eye, the short answer is it's too early to say. I don't like that answer, but it's true. It's a lot more than just what wavelength of red light. It has to do with the amount of energy of that red light, the way it's delivered, where it's delivered, and for what conditions. So some of the best research on benefits of red light are all in aging eye diseases, mainly in macular degeneration. So these are for people over the age of 40 and the condition like macular degeneration, but also some really cool research in actually slowing down and reversing some forms of diabetic eye disease, mainly in macular edema, which is swelling of the retinal tissue due to bleeding or leakage of fluid inside the eye from diabetes. So right now, I don't advise anybody to go out and buy any form of red light therapy and shine it in their eyes just yet, especially with all of the devices that you find just over the counter, because there's very little regulation and very little testing. And honestly, right now, not enough science to say it's safe. We just don't know enough yet. Mm-hmm. But I know it's coming, and I think it is going to somewhat revolutionize a lot of even the eye care industry. Because right now they do have they have two devices that are being investigated by the US FDA right now as a treatment for macular degeneration and then potentially diabetic retinopathy down the line. But they are currently approved in both Europe and South America.
Wow. And
so there are trials, and they're ongoing, and they are very promising, and then they show quite a high level of safety. So right now that's kind of like a brewing thing in the eye care industry. Is, I would say of all the industries out there, eye care is one of probably the most cautious when it comes to adopting a new technology. Like something will come out and it really won't, like new research will come out, but the eye care industry won't adopt it till like 15 years later, because they're they don't want to cause blind. One of the worst things, even from a legal standpoint in the United States, if a doctor tries a new therapy of some kind and what happens, somebody goes blind, it's like you instantly lost like every legal battle ever. So but right now red light therapy is fascinating, and at least right now we know a lot of benefits for the skin, right? It's been used in dermatology for a long time, and there's a few good research studies on its benefit for dry eye and even chalazion, kind of like a cyst that forms in the eyelid.
Interesting. Well, we'll have to have a whole other episode just dedicated to red light therapy in about, I don't know, 3 to 5 years, where we can accurately say what the verdict is.
Yeah, right now it's just, it's just fascinating things in the research, but we can't really, I don't feel comfortable making recommendations to my patients even right now on it, other than just like, stay tuned.
No, that makes sense. So switching from red light, what about direct sunlight? So obviously we hear one of the best things to do in the morning just to help regulate your circadian system is to go out and get that morning sun exposure. And again, I've heard conflicting things about whether or not you should look directly into the sun. What is your take on that?
I don't recommend directly staring into the sun. The energy levels are so powerful, and there is what's called a solar retinopathy. And I have a patient who recently had this because they're a sun gazer. There's some people and some religions and just there's some methodology where people recommend gazing at the sun. But like this patient of mine, she's been a sun gazer, and she came in because she's got this spot in her vision, this permanent blank spot. She can't read 20/20 anymore, no matter what pair of glasses we prescribe her. And that's because she has a burnt, there's an area of her retina that is burnt and gone because she stared at the sun too long.
What is too long?
What
do you consider too long?
Well, it depends a little bit on, again, the horizon, where the sun is in the horizon, but even just a matter of seconds to minutes is too long of direct staring at the sun. Wow. Think of when you burn, when you see kids with magnifying glasses and they're burning ants.
Yeah.
I don't know if did you ever do that as a kid?
No, but I've seen it happen.
Yeah. So it doesn't take long to set a leaf on fire from a magnifying glass or burn ants with a magnifying glass. That is literally what's happening inside of your eye when you stare at the sun.
Wow.
It's
That's
the
crazy.
light, that energy. The sun is so powerful that energy gets focused and will burn a hole in the back of your eye. And so that's why doctors don't recommend it. I think there is that benefit of getting up in the morning, going for a walk, getting that natural sunlight into your eyes. We know that triggers a whole cascade of signals in the brain to wake up, shut down melatonin production. But as far as like sun gazing, I don't recommend staring directly at the sun.
All right, noted. I will avoid doing that from now on. Not that I do it too frequently, but there are times where I just admire the sun. But going back to sun exposure, so I've also read interesting, again, conflicting research on sunglasses, right? And I'm sure you've heard a whole lot about this, but I've heard that it can actually impact your body's ability. Wearing sunglasses, that is, can impact your body's ability to produce vitamin D. What is your take on that?
My question is always like, what evidence what evidence is that, and what is it suggesting, right? Originally, I think it all stemmed from a publication in 2014 that found that some cells inside of the eye have the capacity to produce vitamin D. That doesn't really mean much because other cells in your body, like your internal organs that never see sunlight, still have the capacity to make vitamin D. The other component to it is that kind of honestly the publications that completely diminish the argument that sunglasses are bad for your health is the fact that sun tanning beds that give you UVB radiation that triggers your body's production of vitamin D. You wear eye care protection that blacks out everything during that procedure, and so you still produce vitamin D from it. So unfortunately, the vitamin D plays a huge role in so many immune complexes in our body and the eye. So I have no doubt that vitamin D plays a role in the eye, but whether or not sunlight activates that, right now, it just doesn't seem that the science points in that direction. The real benefit of wearing sunglasses for the eye, the biggest benefit is prevention of skin cancer on the eyelid. Your lower eyelid is one of the highest most likely places to develop a skin cancer, like basal cell carcinoma. And that's because, the sunlight overhead hits the lower eyelid, not the top eyelid, because you got the brow that covers it. Yeah. And so, and your eyelids are the thinnest skin on your body. And so this UV light, for example, sunglasses primarily prevent UV light exposure. UV light will cause kind of like a sunburn to the eye, just as it will any other part of the skin. And so people will develop what's called photokeratitis. And people who weld for a living, they know of this firsthand, because if they ever lift up that visor and you don't have the shield in front of their eyes, the welding flash will cause that same photokeratitis sunburn to the eye. So
wow. That's crazy. Things you don't even think about, right? And yeah, like when would we ever put sunscreen on our lower eyelids?
Right. And UV light slows down the healing of the eye too. That's why after you have LASIK surgery, it's recommended to wear sunglasses like all the time until at least 3 months afterward, just because the UV light slows down the healing process.
Interesting. Is there a particular, I don't like to drop brand names, but I guess when someone's looking for like a certain type of sunglasses that's most protective, what should they be looking for?
So most sunglasses will have 100% UV light protection or pretty close to it. It's important to look for some sort of a stamp or something, or at least a sticker that says UV 400 or full UV light protection, just because some, especially really like dollar store sunglasses, will have, they'll be made of just some cheap plastic that maybe protects, UV C or UVB, but it doesn't have the full protection of the entire UV spectrum. And the concern, if you get those really cheap ones, then your pupil will dilate more behind the sunglasses, and then you're letting more UV light in. That's the theory. But no, as far as it comes to brands, anything you find at a sunglasses store that's specifically selling sunglasses or like an optical, and most things I find today will have you full UV light protection.
Interesting. All right, noted. See, I'm gonna start incorporating Dr. Joseph all these new routines now. Not looking at the sun, always wearing sunglasses. And
Well,
also,
I just not to cut you off, but just one caveat thing: you don't always have to wear sunglasses, but it is recommended, at the high peak UV light exposure times,
yeah.
10 to 4 p.m. in the afternoon. But in the morning, like you said, if you wake up and the sun is low on the horizon, you maybe don't need to wear sunglasses during that time, or maybe late in the evening.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. One other question I did have for you when you were just talking about the whole sunburn on our lower eyelids. Sometimes I'll notice that, particularly in the summertime, if I'm on the beach, right, and I take my sunglasses off, I'll see, I don't know if you'd call them floaters, but yeah, essentially just like everywhere right in front of me. And for a moment, I'll stop, I'll be like, what is going on? Is that from the sun?
Not necessarily. So there are different kind of things that happen in the eye that result in symptoms of eye floaters, or these little spots in your vision.
Yeah.
The most classical cause of what a floater is really happening is the gel inside the eye starts to break down as we get older. And the gel is mostly water, but it has some collagen in it. And the collagen clumps together and forms these little clumps of collagen proteins. And they sit suspended in this gel, this fluid. And when you look left, look right, it floats back and forth. And then the light will cast a shadow in the back of your eye, and then you see it more. On a bright, sunny day, like you pointed out, if it's bright and sunny, you seem to notice them more. And that's believed to be because your pupil on a bright, sunny day gets really small. And on a bright, sunny day, with the pupil gets smaller, it casts a more robust, darker shadow of these floating collagen deposits on the retina of the back of the eye, so you see them more. And so that's why people see it a lot more if they stare at the sky, or if they look like, if it's here in Minnesota where it's like a blanket of snow.
Jealous.
You see it a lot more. And so that's why a lot of people are probably more aware of their floaters if they stare at a white computer screen, if they look at the blue sky, or if, again, it's snowed out or it's a bright sunny day.
Interesting. So how do we get rid of them?
Gosh, I wish there was like a snap of the finger answer for this one. Most people's eye floaters do develop just due to age, and they usually, you neuroadapt to them, meaning you learn that once they're not like something to worry about, you kind of learn to ignore them. Sometimes a lot of patients will report floaters just get better within 6 months after they start noticing them. That's most cases. Mm-hmm. But truly, we don't have like an easy fix to get rid of them. There are some surgical procedures, one of which is using a laser, which quite literally your surgeon plays like the Asteroids video game.
That's
shooting.
A scary thought.
Well, thankfully, it's quite safe. But if there's really large floaters, they can vaporize this floater. And it does break it into really tiny sections. So it doesn't 100% eliminate floaters, but it can, if you have a large one that's floating in the middle of the eye and it's bothering your vision, they can make it smaller and less noticeable. I guess if there was an ultimate cure, it would be called a vitrectomy. This is a surgery where the surgeon, a retina specialist, will siphon out the gel inside the eye and replace it with an alternate fluid.
Oh my goodness.
And I'll tell you this, though, for anybody listening, if you go see a retina specialist and ask them to do this procedure, most of the time they're going to say no, because not only does it carry its own risks, of potential like retinal detachment or retinal hemorrhaging. They don't want anything negative. They don't want to cause your vision loss. That's again a legal issue, and it goes against their oath, of doing no harm. But if you, it basically will guarantee you that you will get cataracts very quickly, because the gel inside the eye harbors a lot of vitamin C, and that prevents oxidation of the lens inside the eye. And so if you remove that gel, then oxidative stress increases and the cataract will form very quickly.
Wow, that's crazy. It's so complex. Have you, I mean, I'm sure you've done eye surgeries yourself. What's like the scariest surgery that you've done?
Well, myself personally, I'm a doctor of optometry, so I don't get trained on invasive surgical procedures. I honestly knew when I knew I wanted to be an eye care physician, I had to choose which path do I want to go. Do I want to be a clinician and be a doctor of optometry, or do I want to be a surgeon and go into ophthalmology? And I shadowed ophthalmology. And as soon as I saw blood, and thankfully, like cataract surgery, there's not much blood. But then they brought in a young kid and they did strabismus surgery, which they cut the eye muscles.
Ooh.
And as soon as I saw blood, I damn near passed out in the operating room. So I'm happy I did that. For anybody who's thinking of going into healthcare of any field, I suggest strongly shadow surgeons, shadow different doctors, see what the life is like. Because I'm just somebody who can't handle blood guts. My body has like a visceral reaction where I'm going to pass out. So I'm like, I still want to do eyes. So I'm going to stick in the clinic and do everything else related to medicine. I'm going to treat the eye, diagnose, manage, but I'm not going to do the surgery component. And so I love working with the surgeons because they're amazing at what they do. With that being said, I do some surgical procedures in the clinic, but they're all clinic based. So I don't go into the operating room.
Gotcha.
So probably the surgical procedures that I do are like, I'll debride the cornea after somebody has like an injury to the eye. Mm-hmm. This is removing the epithelial layer on the surface of the eye. We'll place like an amniotic membrane. So this is a transplanted amniotic tissue that gets placed on the eye. Wow. And this helps healing. It has a lot of antibodies that prevent scarring, it basically helps heal the tissue very quickly. And we'll use this for many different treatments, but we'll put that on the eye. So we'll do a lot of those surgical procedures that can be done in office.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But again, if you need to have your eye cut open, do cataract surgery, you need to have a retinal surgery, I'm not going to touch that. I'm going to hand that to the specialist who's been doing that nonstop every day.
I would definitely have chosen the same path you did. So I completely resonates with me. Right. Question for you though. So you mentioned strabismus. Mm-hmm. Are there any eye exercises that folks could do? I mean, that obviously is more of a, more on the severe side of the spectrum, but I don't know. Are there just like general, like, just like we work out our muscles in the gym, like, are there eye exercises that we could be doing every day?
There are some you can do, and I think they may have utility for helping some people with eye flexibility and some of their eye strain to some degree. The most historical one, which is just called pencil push-ups. So this is one where you just matter of taking a pen or a pencil and you hold it out about arm's length away and you focus it so you see one pen or one pencil, and then you slowly bring that inward toward your nose and to the point where you can just see it go fuzzy. Like you can't clear it up. No matter how hard you try to focus, you can't clear it up. And sometimes you eventually can clear it up, and then you try to push a little further. You try to get it to your nose, or when you start to see it break into two pens or two pencils. And then you kind of slowly push it back. And you do that multiple times. And there's varying versions of this. One of my favorites is using what's called a Brock string. It's basically a string with 3 marbles on it. It can have up to like 5 or 6 different marbles on it, but you space those marbles out across a certain amount, and then you train your eye muscles to jump between these marbles and then slowly control it. And this is used mainly for eye muscle conditions like convergence insufficiency, for these are for like young kids or adults who can't bring their eyes together to cross. Otherwise, they see double all the time. And we use this also for traumatic brain injury patients. It helps them rehabilitate faster. The use in like somebody who has a normal eyes and doesn't have one of these conditions, again, it may improve their eye teaming and flexibility, and it may ward off the development of presbyopia a little bit, but ultimately presbyopia will eventually set in. But I think it's something that if people are having trouble with eye strain, eye teaming, doing some of those exercises may kind of train the neurological connections between the eye, the brain, the focus, and that can help in that regard.
Interesting. Yeah. So you mentioned TBI. I have had a history of some pretty severe concussions,
Oh
all
no.
not sports related. That's the irony. I played sports, but none of them happened from a sports incident. But I suffered from blurry vision, I want to say for up to almost 3 months after my head injury. So in addition to some of those exercises that you just outlined, for people who are recovering from concussions and are experiencing eye issues, what else could they start to include into their routine?
So the very earliest thing I would say is certainly have an eye exam. Let them know that you've had a concussion or some sort of head injury. There is research showing that even small amounts of refractive error are beneficial to correct when you've had traumatic brain injury. So they can bring some comfort to the eyes and balancing out how your eye muscles are working, because you may have one stronger eye than the other. And so if you're using your muscles more in one eye to compensate for the other, it can lead to things like not only eye strain, but headaches. Light sensitivity is a big one after brain injury. So, sunglasses, one component. There is some fascinating newer research since 2016 on different colors of light and how that stimulates our neuroanatomy. So when I was doing my residency that had a TBI rehabilitative component, we would often prescribe glasses that are quite literally rose tinted glasses using a filter called FL41. Ever heard of those or seen those?
I've heard of rose glasses, but not in the context of like concussion recovery. That's so
Yeah.
interesting.
And so we would prescribe those glasses because they would help reduce levels of light sensitivity related to migraines. And more recent research, since I finished my residency, they found green light, certain wavelengths of green light are much more beneficial for photosensitivity related to migraine. And so there are some companies now coming out with green tinted glasses that filter to that specific wavelength of light.
Interesting.
To reduce this kind of this neurological trigger component to wavelengths of light.
Wow.
So there is some information about that, and I think it's worthwhile for anybody who's had head injury to at least ask their doctor if they've heard of this. Usually it's a very subspecialty of eye care that does vision rehabilitation or what's called NORA. This is Neuro Optometric Rehabilitative Association. These are eye doctors who specialize in traumatic brain injury, that specialize in vision rehabilitation. But there's a lot of eye muscle exercises and certain kind of tips and tools that they may be able to provide.
That's so interesting. Yeah, I mean, I was just told to stay in the dark for months on end and don't really do anything.
It does take time. The brain has to heal.
Yeah.
I've got one of my gym buddies. He fights MMA, and he took a strong blow to the head, and he had to sit out. He had to quit for like 3 months just to let everything, because he noticed like memory problems, and concentration problems, sleep problems. We have to be. I think we have to be a little bit more aware and cautious about like the health of our brain.
Yeah. And just going back to those exercises though, and even like the rose colored glasses, is there a certain time, like once someone sustains a head injury, that I guess like they'd receive the most benefit from those treatments, or can it be like even past a year?
Certainly the earlier the better. Usually 6 months. That first 6 months is the most critical period. I still think after a year, for people who are suffering, it's whether it be headaches, whether it be focus issues, it's I think it's still worthwhile to have an evaluation and see if there's anything that could help. The neuroplasticity of the brain, we used to think after the age of 8 to 11 years old that it was shut off, but we've learned that no, there's it might be less, but there's still neuroplasticity of the brain to relearn new things, to make new connections. And after any sort of head injury, I think it's really important to get that to kind of go back to reforming connections and heal.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's funny. I mean, we learned from our experiences, right? And I certainly learned a lot about concussion recovery through mine, such that whenever my friends sustain head injuries, I'm like, take your fish oil, take your arnica, like load up on lion's mane mushroom, like all these proven supplements that we know like stimulate BDNF and help your brain heal.
Lion's mane's fascinating. There's not a whole lot of research on that for the eyes, but I do think it's fascinating. The omega-3 though, that I have another kind of interest down that path in nutrition, because the retina photoreceptors, about 60% of the phospholipids in the retina are DHA omega-3.
Interesting.
And there's a lot of epidemiological studies showing that people who consume more oily fish, like with a Mediterranean diet, they are less likely to develop macular degeneration, diabetic retinopathy. However, people who take omega-3 supplements, even DHA supplements, don't have the same exact evidence in the research.
Interesting.
Until this last few years, they've been doing studies on Alzheimer's, because they're trying to understand how omega-3 could be beneficial for Alzheimer's. And they found that not all omega-3s or forms of omega-3 cross the blood-brain barrier. And the blood-brain barrier is very similar to the blood-retinal barrier, because the retina is just an extension of the brain. And so now that they have, it's called a lysophospholipid form of DHA. And they've been able to synthesize that and feed it to rats, and find that greatly reduces their development of retinal disease. Wow. So I think, again, in the next few years, as more research comes out, we're going to see this like hyper focus on this different form of DHA and omega-3 that may be beneficial not just for the eyes, but very much so for the brain.
Interesting. So with that, I mean, would you say then it's like beneficial for folks to supplement with a regular fish oil right now? Or
right now, it's not quite as clear when it comes to retinal disease. There are some studies that show some support for it, but the exact dosage, it's a little bit unclear. So right now, I still see the most evidence for eating oily fish, once or twice a week, does provide more of that specific lysophospholipid DHA versus because the process of breaking down and making fish oils doesn't have that, doesn't have as much of that lysophospholipid DHA component. And even fish don't have a whole lot, but they have more than what's in the supplements.
Right.
So I do point toward the evidence that, the evidence shows that people who eat fish are less likely to have these things. I think omega-3 supplements are beneficial for other things in the body. So I still do take them, and I'll recommend them for some patients with dry eye. Mm-hmm. But I think we're still kind of, it's like red light. We're waiting for more research.
Yeah. I'm curious for you, what's your daily supplement regimen?
So I do take a lutein and zeaxanthin eye supplement.
Okay.
Even though I eat largely vegetarian, I guess I eat Mediterranean diet. I do eat fish occasionally, but I eat lutein. I take a lutein and zeaxanthin supplement. What else do I take? So right now I am taking an algae-based omega-3. Okay. Because I'm doing a self-study trying to see how algae omega-3s affect my dry eye. I actually weaned myself off of fish oil omega-3s for about 4 or 5 months to let myself go back to baseline of what I was getting with just food. And now I'm testing my blood levels and my dry eye levels.
Interesting.
For at least 3-4 months to see what kind of an effect I get off of algae-based.
Are you going to publish your results?
Yeah. Well, I did like a YouTube video on it last year when I did using it, the fish-based oil. And so I'm going to kind of do a second, like a part 2 of it, testing algae based, because there's really no
Awesome.
published research using algae based omega-3 on dry eye. So I'm kind of just, only an N of 1. It's not that significant. It's
I love
anecdotal.
that. You're like
But
me. I experiment on myself all the time.
right. I do take creatine, not just for weightlifting, but also for neurological benefits. There's a lot of interesting research on that. And I actually, and again, it's anecdotal, but it's also published in research that people who take creatine sometimes have less problems with mental health issues. And I've struggled with depression at times in my life, and with taking creatine, I've found that life is I just don't seem to have as low of lows as I've had in the past.
Interesting. I recently started supplementing with that too.
Yeah. So for any reason, under any guidance, or
I heard muscle recovery. I started to get more interested in weightlifting, so I'm like, how can I optimize my muscle health? But
right.
I don't take it regularly. I'm more
okay.
on and off.
I'm not a specialist in the exercise physiology, but it's in my free time when I'm not studying eye care. I study a lot of nutrition and lifestyle medicine sort of things. So at least they say five milligrams of the creatine monohydrate per day, better for muscle mass building, but even just as low as 3 milligrams per day is effective for more of mental benefits.
Interesting.
But again, I think if anybody's looking into that, definitely consult other professionals in that space. But it's something that I found has helped me. What else? Right now, trying to think if there's anything else on I have like this whole like several bottles.
Didn't mean to put you on the spot. I know. I have so many things in my cabinet. I try to derive most of my nutrients from food. I think that's obviously like the best route, and I too eat pretty 100%. Mediterranean based, but yeah, there are a few things that I supplement with occasionally.
The vitamin D is one that here in Minnesota, I'm indoors a lot of the time, have been my whole life. I'm super pale. When I am outside in the summer, I'm wearing sunscreen. But in the wintertime, even if I do go outside, I don't get that much sunlight exposure because I'm wearing a jacket. I'm completely covered. So during the winter months, I do try to take like maybe 1,000 milligrams of DHA, or not DHA, of vitamin D. But I also try to be cautious of that. I'd rather have it from natural sources. Most people also get vitamin D supplemented in forms of fortified foods anyway.
Yeah, interesting. If you weren't doing in optometry right now, what would you be doing? You said you're super interested in lifestyle, medicine, and health. I obviously am too, but
it's tough. I've considered going back to school and getting like a second degree in nutrition or something like that. I would probably be a physiology professor at like a university, just because I can read textbooks on like neuroanatomy and physiology and electron potentials.
Wow.
and it is beautiful, right? That's one of the best things about life, is like when you just have that sense of wonder of how amazing the science and just like how things work in your body. I think that was when I realized I really wanted to go into healthcare, was studying physiology in college. And we started studying, of all things, like cocaine addiction, and understanding how the receptors change in the synaptic cleft due to dope. Like, it just blew my mind, and I was like, this is so cool.
It's crazy. I know. No, I'm the same way. If I could just be reading health books all day and just studies, that would be my happy place right there. But this is fun too, to have conversations with, again, people like you. And I learned so much from these podcast episodes. That's why I enjoy doing it.
Yeah, it absolutely is amazing. I'm fortunate enough, I started my YouTube channel, the Dr. Eye Health channel, in 2018. And when I started it, I just wanted to share my knowledge, to make it available for people to learn about the eyes and vision, help people understand what to buy better when it comes to things like glasses and contacts.
Yeah.
And it took off. And now I live this crazy life where I get to still help patients out in the clinic, but I get to research these things that I'm interested in and make cool videos, and make lectures where I teach other doctors. I'm very fortunate.
It's truly incredible.
Yeah.
Are you accepting new patients? Can I come see you?
You're more than welcome to. Absolutely.
I'll make the hike up.
Please, we do have several. I've been fortunate enough. I've had people travel around the world to come see me, which always puts you on the spot a little bit. You're like, oh, like this is like they
I'll make
traveled.
room in my schedule.
Yeah. This person's a VIP. We better make sure we put on our best show here.
Love that. Well, you're doing an incredible job balancing everything. So you mentioned your YouTube channel, but where else can listeners find you?
Certainly, the big ones like Instagram. I even have a TikTok channel. Those are the big places. Trying to think. We do have a podcast, but it's more for eye doctors.
That's exciting. I didn't know that.
Yeah. It's we're kind of it's in its infancy. It's only about a year, and right now I'm mostly just. It's called I Give a Damn.
I love that.
But it's interviewing other big names in my industry who are big researchers. They're leaders. They're entrepreneurs, people who are starting new businesses, developing new software technologies. That they're all big leaders in the eye care profession who clearly give a damn about what they do. And so it's maybe less of a deep dive into the research and science of it, unless they're like a researcher. Like we had Lisa Ostrin. She's a PhD researcher at one of the optometry schools here in the US. And she does a lot on blue light. So we did like a deeper dive into blue light therapy with her, or not blue light therapy, but blue light research that she does. But a lot of it's just interviewing these entrepreneurs, these very bright mind individuals, and getting to understand like what motivates them, what bothers them, what they're passionate about, and kind of learning from them. So
that's incredible.
Yeah, it's been a fun journey, and we'll see where it goes.
I love that. Well, I mean, you could say my podcast is technically still in its infancy too. It's not even a year old. I started it last May, have about 40 episodes so far. So I'm still quite the novice, but it's been fun.
I think it's impressive. I started listening to a bunch of your episodes and I loved it. They're very good, and good questions, good just conversation back and forth.
I appreciate it. Well, this has been so fun, Dr. Allen. I'd love to have you on again, but I do want to be conscious of your time. My very last question for you, though, is what does being well and strong mean to you?
Mm-hmm. So well and strong, for me, well is, the opposite of being sick. It's, taking care of yourself, operating in kind of your higher capacity to stay healthy. I think that's what wellness means to me. But then the strong component is not as much of just like strong, like fit strong. To me, it's honestly being more resilient. Mm-hmm. Life is going to have its ups and downs. You're going to have some hard times, whether that be from physical ailments, from the environment, mental challenges, loss of friends, loved ones, economic hard times. And so, hopefully if you're taking good care of yourself, physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, you're going to be more resilient against those harder times in life. And so to me, that's really what well strong is.
I love that. And just when you said that, that reminded me, the olive branch, which is like my symbol, is one of the most resilient plants. So resiliency is definitely a core value of my brand. So I love that you mentioned that.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jacqueline. This has been fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I can't wait to share this with listeners. They're going to be like, eye health, tune in now.